Ships and ways to destroy ships. Using the Viggen, that's easy. We've got 2 anti-ship missiles. We can also go blazing guns and dropping bombs and using RB-05s. But no, anti-shipping is done with anti-shipping missiles. The older and I would say defunct RB-04 that doesn't need any explaining, and the more modern RB-15F, which needs a lot of explaining. I see a lot of confusion about how this missile is used in real life and in the game, and a lot of problems that people run into. And, well, to be honest, the reason that people get into problems with the RB-15 is because they haven't looked at the manual most of the time. And it's also a misunderstanding on, or rather, not a misunderstanding, but it's about not knowing how the Viggen was conceived, I would say. So we'll dive into all that, and I hope that this little mission in the DCS Viggen module will help you in employing the RB-15s in the future. So let's dive into it and dive into the manual. Yeah, we need to start with the manual. Here is the manual that tells things. So, RB-15. What is this beast? Well, it's a very tactical missile, and here is where the knowledge about how Viggen pilots behave, I would say, and how the Viggen system is conceived is important. Now, in real life, the pilot goes to the aircraft, flies the aircraft, fires the missile. He doesn't fiddle around along with all the different settings of the missile. This is done beforehand by people on the ground who understand the missile, who understand the tactical situation, who understand everything, who have the recon data and such. In the game, this is not always the case. A few of these things can be done by the mission editor, the person who does the mission. A few things can't be done, and we'll look at that. So basically, this is the typical RB-15 attack pattern. So you got a B1, a B2, an attack point, and then return points. And I'm going to mimic this in this mission today. So how do we use this? Well, basically, to start with, B1, B2, somewhere along this leg, along here, the distance to BX8, which is the attack point. The BX8 point is the mission point, or the computer's mission point that the RB-15 are hard-coded to go to. So if you have a BX8 and fire the missile, it's going to head towards BX8. And so what you want to have is, you want to have the distance from this leg to that point at around 100 kilometers. The reason for that is that is the range at which you can actually see the targets on the radar scope and update the target position, because the time from the recon has come in to the guys setting up the systems on the ground and programming the data cartridge and whatnot, loading it up on a computer and having it to take off. The ships will have moved. So somewhere along here, you need most of the time to do an update of the BX8 points. So that's done here at 100 roughly kilometers from BX8. Now, the next point, which has a distance which is, I would say, important, is the M3 point, which should be roughly at 80 kilometers from BX8, following this path, because this is the path the missile is going to take. Now, why 80? Well, because the maximum range of the missile is 90, and that needs to be including the distance to BX9. So the maximum path here must be 90. So the distance between M3 and BX8 must be roughly 80. You can fire later. You don't need to fire at M3. You can fly towards the missile, the ships, and fire later. So that's okay. But if you want to have this like timed up and set up properly, try and keep 80 from M3 to BX8 roughly kilometers. Also, what helps is to have B1 and B2 roughly aligned in the direction of the BX8, because when you fly along this leg, the radar is able to look to the side, but as you know, it doesn't. You can't look to the side you can't look to 90 degrees to the side of something. I mean, you're limited to about 45 to 50 degrees if you want to use the radar effectively. So try and keep this more or less in the same heading as the BX8 points, and most of the time that is the case. Now, when you employ the missile, you don't actually need to fly towards M3 and employ it from there. You can be over here, you can be over here, you can be anywhere and fire the missile. What happens next is interesting. The missile will fly towards BX7. It will not fly towards BX6. It will fly towards BX7 and then do a turn to BX8, etc. So let's look at that and why that's the case. So here is BX6, here is BX7, here is BX8, or target area. Your Viggen is here. You're pointed toward BX8 because you've done your updating of the radar scope and whatnot and everything, and you are in range. Okay, so you fire the missile at this point. Now, as soon as the missile is fired, it's going to turn towards BX7, and as you see, it misses BX8 entirely. BX6, sorry, entirely. So why is BX6 important? Well, it's important for one, important reason. The distance between BX7 and BX6, this arc here, is what is important. As the missile passes this distance from BX7, that's the point at which the missile will descend to its low-level flight mode, which is 10 meters over sea level. So during this phase, the missile maintains the fired altitude. So you can actually have a mountain here or a hill which is like 400 meters tall. If you're at 500 meters, you can fire over the hill, and once this missile is safe over water, well, that's one important thing then. You need to have BX6 placed in such a position that it's safe for the missile to dive for the sea level. So it's going to dive and it's going to fly from this point onwards to BX7 at 10 meters. Now, regardless of where you fire the missile from, so if you were here and you fired the missile, it would have gone this way. If you're here and fire it, it will follow the traced route. Okay, before BX7, it's going to perform a turn. So regardless of whether a missile comes from this line here or if it follows this line here, the turn will make it so that the missile is always on the correct course here. It will always be on the correct course on this last leg, the BX7 to BX8 leg. So it predicts the turn so that it ends up on the correct course. On this leg, it will descend to 2 meters over sea level, and once it's within range, we'll get back to what range that is, from the attack point, it will go active and look for targets. Okay, so that now gets us to the next phase, which is going active and looking for targets. There are 3 modes. There's a close mode, the bearing mode. Okay, these two are the same mode. In close mode, it will go active when it's 20 kilometers from the ATP. In bearing mode, it will go active when it's 24 kilometers from ATP. In close, it will look for targets up to 2 kilometers from the seeker head and bearing up to 6 kilometers. So what does this mean? Well, let's go back. After the turn, as soon as it's within 24 kilometers in bearing mode from the targets, it's going to go active and look for targets in this whole cone here. So if there's a ship around here, well, it will go for that ship. It will not fly to the end of the intended course or flight path and attack ships over here. It will attack the first ships it sees in the cone. So these two modes are basically, I don't know, if you don't have a good fix, I would say use them. But if you do have a good fix, area mode is the mode you want to use. And again, all this is normally set up on the ground, so you don't fiddle with this yourself as a pilot in the cockpit. You can do it, and that is something we need to do as players of DCS. But in real life, you don't do that. So area mode is interesting because it only looks around the actual area of the missiles, and the area is approximately 8 kilometers by 8 kilometers, approximately. Okay, so once it detects targets in this area, it will try and determine what targets to hit. I will say one more thing about area, and that is this boundary line. I never used it myself, but it's theoretically possible to set up, no, theoretically, it is possible to set up a boundary line using the CK37 system and tell the missiles don't look at our targets to the other side of this boundary. So if you got friendlies here, well, don't attack them. Or if you got out of, I don't know, what do you call it, rules of engagements tells you not to hit these targets, but you can set a boundary line and still use the normal area mode. Okay, so that's what this boundary line is for. So once it detects targets, what happens is it goes into its target selection mode. Now, this is interesting. Normally, when you fly the Viggen with RB 15s, there are 2 Viggens flying, at least. With 2 Viggens, you carry 4 missiles. Now, it's not commonly the case because both pilots would try and update their target area manually from the cockpit with the radar and such, so it's not going to be precise. But let's assume, just for sake of this discussion, that the target area is exactly the same. The ATP point is exactly the same for both aircraft. Okay, so we've got 4 missiles flying towards the ATP. Now, in single mode, all 4 missiles will target the single target closest to the ATP. So you have 4 missiles going for this ship. Multiple N, well, the 3 closest targets will be targeted. So with 4 missiles, you will hit at least 2 targets and normally 3 targets. Multiple A is random free for all, and group is it's going to target at random any ship which in within 3 kilometers from another ship and within well, so yeah, the closest ship to the ATP is the first ship, and then it's going to target that ship plus any ship which is closer than 3 kilometers to that ship. So group is excellent for attacking, say, a carrier group if you want to increase your chance of hitting the carrier and not hitting the escort ships, for instance. Go for this mode. If you want to hit something which is in the center of a group, use multiple N. If you don't care, use multiple A. So basically, that's the reasoning of this. Okay, moving on. Now, all this, as I've said, is a combination of setting up in the mission editor and setup you need to do in the cockpit. Let's look at the cockpit setup. Okay, you do this by the CK37. So the CK37 is your computer. It's an old computer. It was designed in the 60s, before the transistor was invented. I mean, this predates the first transistor computer. So binary systems on this computer do not work, I wouldn't say always, but many times it doesn't work as we're used to. So for instance, just as an example, if you were to play with the address space 81, so you know that the CK37 has 6 digits. So address 81, that's the 2 first digits in the display. If you entered 2 digits, you got 4 more digits to play with. Now, in address space 81, this tells them, the RB15, what target solution to use, if it's single target, multiple target, and multiple target A or group target. Okay. The way to set this up is to set a zero, not a 1, for the target type you want to have. So in this instance, 0111 means the missile would be set up for single target. So yes for that one, and then no, no, no. So if you want to have multiple targets N, you would set up 81 and then 1011. There can only be 10. There can only be 3 ones. There are no other combination is allowed. Now, these addresses here, I'm not going to go through them. They're not important. You can play with them. They go from 81 to 88. So have fun. No, what is important is to understand the computer basics, function of a computer. So there are shortcuts. There are like 5 different presets that you can select quickly in the cockpit. When you get into the cockpit with RB15s loaded, and this is not something the mission designer can change, it's always going to be loaded up in the 80, so register 80 for quick selections, 0002, which is medium error search with multiple targets A. So basically the missile will do this plus this. So it's random, anything in the area. Me personally, for this mission, and most of the time, I prefer to have multiple target N on medium error search. So I would enter 800001 in the computer. And that's it. With that, I don't need to touch the rest, because the rest is good enough for the game. I mean, all these settings, they are set on the ground. The pilot can override them if needed, but I would say that it's normally not done. And in the game, most of these functions don't actually have such a big impact on the gameplay. So these are the ones you need to play with. Only these 5. And of those 5, well, I only use 2 or 3 myself. So what can you do in the mission planner? How can you set up the RB15 in the mission? So we need to actually look at the mission editor a little bit. I'm sorry, that's the only way about it. So let's do that. Okay, here is the mission. I've hidden a lot of units just for sake of keeping it real. And this is a simple flight plan, so it's the same as in the manual. We've got waypoint 1 over here, and then 2 and 3 and 4, and then they had 5, but I selected this airport for landing, so that's the only difference really. Now, the ships are outside of this unit over here. This unit is just there to show where the ships are. The ships are here somewhere, okay? They are moving, so my mission only has, I would say, dated recon data on the ship's position. So I need to set up my BX6789. To do that, I select the flight, and you click on this square symbol here, and you just add yourself these points. You add 4 points, and you name them. The first one BX6, the second one BX7, etc. up to BX9, and you see them on screen. When you select the flight, you can see these points. Now comes a very important part of this, which is something which is a limitation of the game. The mission designer can only do this if he or she has the Viggen module. If the person doesn't have the Viggen module, that option, this square option here, is not available to the mission designer, so that person cannot set up BX points. Also, for most missions, there are 2 things I would say. 1, the mission designer hasn't set up BX6 7, 8, and 9 at all, and if they have, not properly. And why I'm saying that? Well, look at this here. BX6, as you remember, the distance from BX7 to BX6 is important, because if you were to fire, I would just set up some unit here to have something to show with. Actually, I can use this one here. Damn it. Typical. So if you were to fire from this position, if your Viggen was there when you fired, well, the missile would head in this direction, right? Over land here. And at a distance which is, well, in this case 23 kilometers from BX7, so doing the arc about here, the missile will go and try and do its sea skimming mode. And as you can see, this is not a very good setup. So I need, as a pilot, either to know this and avoid firing the missile from the position I just marked on the map, or place BX6 at another position. In my case, in this mission, I will try and avoid firing the missile from a position too far to the south. I would try and fire my missile when I'm over basically this lake here, which is on the right hand side of the unit right now. So if I'm over the lake, well, the missile will, let's just trace this. If I'm thereabouts, the missile is free. So I need to fire from this area here. See, this is the area where I can fire the missile. Now, next thing to remember is that, so the BX6 is important to avoid terrain. BX7, you can use it tactically. You can actually use BX7 to turn around features. In this case, I use BX7 to turn around land features, but you can also use BX7 to turn around friendlies. So if you got like friendlies on this side here, you can actually turn around the friendly units by having the missile take a detour around the friendly units. BX8 should be as close to the last known good point for the ships you want to attack as possible, and BX9 needs to be some ways away from BX8 to allow the missile to self-destruct. So this is basically the way you can use it. So remember that you can use the points BX6 and BX7 tactically. That is important, but you as a pilot must also know that, I mean, the missile doesn't care, to be honest. I could be here and fire the missile, and when the missile reaches 23 kilometers around here, it would go sea skimming. Well, it would fly into the terrain. But this is something you need to know as a pilot. But you can use them tactically. So this is the basic mission today. We're going to fire from around here somewhere when we're on the northern side of this lake towards BX7 at the distance of BX6. They're going to go sea skimming, turning around the BX7 point, heading towards BX8, attack the ships over there, and hopefully do some damage. Okay, so here's our Viggen for the day, and let's see what we can do with it. I've got RB-15s under the wings, also two RB-74s for self-defense. Okay, so hopping into the cockpit, I've got the autopilot turned on. We're going to turn it towards B2 here, maintaining 500 meters and a little bit fast, 800 kilometers per hour is what I'm aiming for. Turning on some lights and turning off my slave SI. Okay, fine. Now, we're headed towards B2 here at this point. Let's now set up the computer for the attack. So first things first, on tact 9 for B3 to set up as a target point, and code 800001 as we spoke about earlier, to LS to program the missile, and act position and out. Now, to have the missiles obey the computer setup, you need to have the selector switch on vol bar selectable. If you got it on standard, you set it on standard, the missiles will do a standard attack with its own BX6, 7, and 9, regardless of how you programmed the points in the mission editor. That is a quick mode if you don't have any BX points set up beforehand. To fire the missiles, you select the attack pattern on the rotary for the weapon selection, and that's all which you need to do. Okay, flying at 750 kilometers per hour, maintaining 500 meters, and we're overflying B2 at this point. Right, let's turn towards M3, and let's switch to BX8. And why do I do that? Well, I want to look at the area around the ships and update my my target position for the ships. So let's turn on radar and zoom out to 120 kilometers on radar, and I see the ships here in the ring that haven't moved so far. Now, if I need to update the position of the BX8 point, well, what you do is you do a T1 command on the stick. That gets your waypoint indicator flashing the E for updating fixed point from radar. You can now slew the crosshair to where the ships are and command a TV, which will update the ring and its new position. Right, that's all you need to do. Now, once that is done, you've got all the points you need for the attack. If I now switch over to ANF mode here, you have the ring, which is the ship's position, or the BX8 position, a cross now, which shows BX7 position, but nothing for BX6. I happen to know, you can see it here, the outline of the lake, or the water, as I spoke about earlier, that BX6 is about here. So I need to aim for this part of the lake here, as we spoke about earlier, and fire in this general directions. The missiles will fly at the fired altitude to this point, descend, head towards BX7, turn towards BX8. So let's do that. I'm now flying towards, well, you can see that from radar actually. I'm flying towards, let's zoom in, towards the northern part of the lake here, and which is a good firing position. All I need to do now is keep heading towards that part of the flight plan and wait until the line, which is now under the HUD here, is confined between the outer limiters of the maximum range indication for the missile, and at this point they're inside, so I can go ahead and fire the missile. I don't need to point more than this. So, unsafely weaponed, looking up, and fire 1 and 2, and nothing happened. We have no release. The reason for that is simple. I've got a big red light here, which tells me you cannot fire the missile. There is something wrong in the setup. And what is wrong in this case, I happen to know that beforehand, because this is a small thing I did. That is the BX9 point is way too close to BX8. I need to move away the BX9 point. So I choose BX9. Sorry, I need to go to nav mode first. Then I select BX9, which I already clicked, so that was already selected. And I now need to move this point. The way to do that is go into fixed mode. So T1. Get fix blinking for radar fix, crosshair over T9, move it away some kilometers, update the point, boom, it's moved away. Now, back to B3 or whatever, turn off the radar, go into NF mode, and the big red light has vanished. And I'm still in range, I'm still headed roughly in the right direction, so fire the missiles at this time. So, unsafe, 3, 2, 1, fire. Okay, missile 1 and missile 2 are off. Going into nav mode, turning towards B4, selected that manually, and let's have a look at the missiles. Here they are, both missiles in view, maintaining the fired altitude of 470 meters. Me, I'm doing something else. I'm headed home. I don't want to be anywhere near the ships at this time. Okay, I don't have B4, that was my error. I only have L1 for landing, so selecting that, I've got the direction for Anapa here. So let's have a look at the missiles and see what they do. Once they get well into this bay here, they're gonna dive for the water, or dive for the surface. And from the position where I fired them, it's clear. They can dive without hitting terrain. So here was the BX6 point, and they're now diving to an altitude of 10 meters. I'm going to switch missile here and follow the trailing missile. And they are leveling off. Let's see what I'm doing here. Let's keep, well, 100 degrees, that's going to be fine. So here they are now, cruising at at 10 meters. And heading towards the far end of the landmass here. At what point they're gonna turn, make a left turn, and head towards the ship or ships. Okay, I can see the last feature of land just above the first missile there, and I can see the ships far off in the horizon as well. So the turn should come soon here. Okay, there's BX7. They are now headed towards the ships. And 20 kilometers thereabouts from ships, they're going to go active and start looking for targets. And this is target type N, so they're going to hit 3 random targets closest to the ATP, or in this case 2. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that happens. It's quite common. Okay, one missile is off to the side and the other one is still tracking. So one ship, boom, and the other ship here. Oh, it's a sub. Nice. Boom. Okay, I sunk a sub. That wasn't what I was expecting, but that's fun. Great. Okay, so mission accomplished. We now have the airport on our right-hand side over there somewhere. The runway is a 221. So let's keep on flying this direction for a little bit longer. And today I'm going to do a short field landing. I want to show that. So turning off the autopilot, I'm going to turn towards the airport this time and walk you through the process. There are several ways of doing this. I'm going to do a direct landing. You can do a full pattern landing if you want to do that. In which case you would do the pattern at approximately 250 meters and 550 kilometers per hour, extend your gear on the downwind leg and maintain 350 approximately in the last turn before you land on the after the base leg. But today I'm going to do it straight in. So to do that, I'm going to set the selector to landing PO, and I'm now aligned with the runway, and I'm a bit close here. I'm at 7 kilometers and 550 kilometers per hour is extend speed, so I will not do this in direct mode. I need to abort that and make it go around. So what I will do is I will do a pattern. So I'm gonna fly along the runway, the same runway heading here, and have a look at the runway to see that it's clear, and maintain 250 meters. And 550 kilometers an hour. Okay, the runway seems to be clear, no Herculeses or anything else on it, so that's fine. Okay, I now have the runway end at 45 degrees aft, so let's do a left-hand turn here, maintaining 250 meters thereabouts, and 550 kilometers per hour. So I'm a little bit slow, correcting for that. So the landing direction being at 221, the direction I'm looking for here now is a 41. I'm at 350 meters, which is high. Coming up to 41 degrees. And there is 41 degrees. 04 on the HUD and 270 on the HUD. Okay, I need to slow down, and I beam the center of the runway, so this time I need to slow down more, and I want to extend my gear. I also want to prime my reverser and tick in the 15.5 degrees angle of attack. The reason for that is short runway landings are done at 550. In this phase, the detached fin on the FPM shows 550 kilometers per hour. If I extend the gear now, I'm late doing that, but it's okay. The AOA now, the fin on the FPM now shows AOA of 15.5 degrees. So let's, with the gear down now, let's turn back towards the final on the base, maintain 250 meters and letting the speed drop to 350, but not lower. Right now I don't want to fly at the AOA indicator because that's going to be too slow. I need to open my turn a little bit because the W here is on 230 and I want to have it on 221 when I finish my turn. Okay, that should be pretty much... wasn't excellent, but it's okay for the approach. Now, I want to lower my HUD, maintain my altitude, and start flying the AOA. So I'm going to chase the AOA, okay, there it is, and try and placing it on the FPM marker, and the FPM marker on the dot. It's always going to be on the dot, and the dot where I want to have the landing. So aligning all the components on the HUD, rebuilding the whole HUD, making it whole, so to speak. That's going to guide me to a landing here. So let's try and find the AOA, the speed for AOA. There it is, approximately. And there's the horn, of course. And full reversers, full brakes. Reversers off. Okay, so that was a landing, short landing at 15.5 degrees AOA. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please click the little thumb symbol with the thumb pointing upwards. Subscribe, spread the word, and I'll see you soon enough for another part in this series. So thank you and goodbye.